good thing that the period I represent deals with Texas independence, not ancient Rome, because if it were ancient Rome, I would be looking at signs and omens and stuff like that. And coming over here today, turned off of Southwest Parkway on the Glade, and what did I see? There's a buzzard, a vulture, sitting out there in the middle of the street, eating some dead animal. Well, now if it had been the eagle, that would have been a good omen, but it was a buzzard, a vulture. So it's with much trepidation that I appear before you today. Okay. Anyway, got a lot of notes to go through here. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit today about living history, about reenactors. I'm going to give you some background information, talk about some of the regional opportunities in Texas, how we started, what we do, and maybe show you a reenactment movie or two. Now, to begin with, for as long as man has been acting up on this earth, he's been recording and reenacting his greatest triumphs. Imagine, if you will, the caveman of returning to his abode on a winter's eve, bearing a slain deer to share with his extended family or tribe. And by the way, everything was bigger in the old days and better. Okay. That night, after everyone has feasted, small child asks him to share the story of the successful hunt. Well, the less dramatic hunter might say, saw it, killed it, brought it home. People still talk like that today. I know some of them. Now, if I'd been that hunter, it would have been a little bit different. I would have stood up, patted my full belly, because we would have eaten already. Okay, then I would probably have crouched, and I put my hands above my head so it looked like antlers, you know, not wiggly antlers or whatever. Okay, and then I would have sat around wandering among the audience that I had there around the fire, pretending to nibble at the heads of the little kids like they were delectable bushes. Okay, then I would have changed character, grabbed my spear and addle, crouched again and gone slinking off hunting that deer. Periodically, I would switch back to being the deer, you know, with the antlers up here, okay, and looking up warily around to make sure there's no danger, and then going back to browsing. And then finally, as the hunter, I would have stood up, flung my spear, given a yell of triumph as I slew the deer, and then I would pick up one of the kids, you know, run him around the fire once or twice and set him back down. So I wouldn't have been just a storyteller, I would have been a reenactor. Okay, and there would have been an endless, oh, that's, yeah, I'm not going as I should here. There's the spear. Okay, and there would have been an endless succession of reenactors after me. They certainly existed in the time of ancient Greece in a more formal role of the theater. Okay, but the Romans, they took reenactments to a new level. Battles both on land and sea were staged in the Colosseum before audiences of over 50,000. Lacking the Greek amphitheaters, the Roman dramas were expansive affairs conducted on the hillsides, and they were big. Cicero wrote, or mainly complained about, one such play that had 600 mules on stage at one time. So it was a big stage, it's a big production. Okay, well, that wasn't a play, that was a reenactment. Okay, but enough of ancient history. We're going to move forward to more modern times. And the term living history describes the reenactor's art. It is an attempt to bring history to life. The more senses that you can engage, the more authentic and memorable the experience. Now, I can remember that I was not always interested in history. In fact, I was probably very disinterested at some point in time. But after I learned to read, my dad brought home a book called Texas History Movies. Some of you may have seen these or may still have them, okay? All right. Essentially, it's a comic book account of Texas history. And of course, comic books were popular when I was a kid. Anyway, that got me hooked. It was more than just words printed on a page. We had images as well. But it didn't really engage my senses of touch, hearing, and smell. By the way, you can still purchase the Texas History Movies today, or you can even get the new version that's revised and more politically correct. I'll let you. Much revised. Okay. But anyway, it still exists. Okay, now you may think, okay, what is this doing? Okay, but anyway, historical movies and television programs with stereo, with quadraphonic sound, they increase the realism of an event, and 3D television is probably going to revolutionize that even further. Now Huxley, some of you remember him, in his novel Brave New World, predicted a future theater. It's called the Feelies, okay, in which the sights, sounds, and smells, and even the tactile feeling of an object would be electronically transmitted to the audience. Now, we live in a high-tech society today, but some of those things are still beyond our reach, although Disney is getting close, very close. For example, if you get on the dinosaur ride, you feel the heat, the humidity rises as you move into there, you smell the swamp, and you can certainly hear and see the animals that are there. Okay, but anyway, there is a low-tech alternative to Disney, okay, used to promote history, and that's where reenactors shine. We do it, as they say, the old-fashioned way, okay? You can hear the crack of the musket fire, you can watch the flames shooting from the end of the barrel, you can smell and even taste the smoke that comes out, and you can feel the ground shake when the cannon is fired. And after that's been fired, if you're quiet, you can hear the rolling thunder echoing through the hills, particularly if you go to the Texas Heroes Day at LaGrange. Okay. Do not think, however, that all reenactments are based on hunting or warfare. It's just that those appeal to those kinds of events appeal to those of us who like things that go boom. Okay, for others, reenactments are a way of connecting with our ancestral past, particularly to a time when things were a little bit less hectic, where the pace was slower, and sometimes change was measured over generations, okay? For many of us, it's just simply an escape from the pace of modern life. It is, after all, a lot easier to learn how to use a butter churn than an iPhone. At least for me it is. And I'm, technically inclined, supposedly. Okay, reenactors are commonly divided, or they self-divide, into three categories based on a level of concern for authenticity. The first group are the beginning reenactors, who spend relatively little time or effort or money, okay, maintaining authenticity with regard to uniforms, accessory, or even period behavior. For this group, reenactments are simply a fun thing to do. And often it is the social group in which they're participating, their friends, in other words, that make it, or are the primary motivator for participation. Now, your mainstream reenactors make an effort at appearing authentic, okay? But they tend to slip out of character in the absence of an audience. So if I'm not appearing before the group, I may relax the way I do things. So clothing may not be sewn in a period correct manner. It may not even be period appropriate, okay? Food cooked and consumed in front of an audience is likely to be generally appropriate to the period, but may not actually be seasonally and locally available. Okay, modern items are sometimes used after hours, but hidden back there in the tent. And so there'll be an ice chest back there, and with milk and butter and canned soda, and all that hidden under a Mexican woven blanket. And they may be carrying Gatorade in their canteens. All right? Okay, but the general attitude is to have a great time, put on a good show, but accuracy is not necessarily paramount. It is the look and feel that counts. Now we have a nice little scene here from Leandro Plantation. A little close-up on this guy. What do you see that's not period appropriate there? Okay. A wristwatch, yeah, Filter-tipped cigarette, okay. Probably sliced white bread, all of those things not period appropriate. But then well, he wasn't out of sight of the camera, but there he is anyway. Now, he's a good reenactor. He has fun, but when the people aren't seeing him, like eating a meal here, he tends to relax and, go out of character. Now, the hardcore or progressive reenactors place considerable value on research and authenticity. They seek to live as someone of the period might have. Okay, this includes eating seasonally and regionally appropriate foods, cooked in an authentic manner. They sew inside seams and undergarments in period appropriate manner, and they stay in character throughout an event. Okay, this includes their speech and conversations as well. Sometimes take it even further. I know one reenactor with the Texas Army out of San Jacinto who bored out his own pistol. And that was quite a little feat, actually. Now back to living history. If you were to go to the Visitor Center at Fort Union in Watrous, New Mexico, you'd see all kinds of period historic photographs, but you would also find reenactors. These are professional and seasonal employees of the National Park Service. Okay? They're dressed in hand-stitched uniforms. Okay? They cook and share hardtack over an open fire. And you go up, they offer you one of these hardtack biscuits. They drink coffee that's been boiled in the pot, and you strain it out through your teeth. So people don't usually go back for a second cup these days, but anyway. And they have drill and practice, much as they would have done as troopers back in the 1800s. And they talk in the present day. You know, like they talk about last night's Indian raid, or they talk about the lousy whiskey that is at the local saloon. Okay? It's not past tense. They don't say, okay, back in 1880, this fort was under, no. They talk about last night's Indian raid. Colonial Williamsburg is another example of professional reenactors and volunteers as well, utilized in the national parks. Men and women stroll about in period-appropriate clothing, hand-stitched, in a setting where the structures, the furniture, the utensils, everything is authentic, if not antique. Okay? And such historical sites and pioneer farms, and even the crops that they have been retro-breeded to be as authentic to the period as the buildings and the tools. Now, moving closer to home, Renaissance fairs, such as the one we have at Plantersville or the one outside of Austin, are examples of commercial reenactments. They're relatively close to home. You know, there is a price to get in, but so Williamsburg is also about the same cost. The participants, as well as the vendors, wear period dress, or what purports to be period clothing, and converse in what might loosely be termed Old English. You know, like, "Good day, me lord, me lady, how fare ye?" Okay? Translated, if you don't know Old English, that means, "Please buy something from my shop." Okay, the costumes sometimes border on fantasy. And even in the worst of weather, the pathways do not correspond to historical accounts of the conditions encountered in medieval times. Thank goodness. You know, there'd be no repeat visitation. Okay? But the architecture, the landscape, the revelry, all contribute to the visitor's experience. Okay? And for some, that may be the beginnings of an interest in the study of history. Okay, the Rendezvous. Originally it was derived from the annual gatherings of fur trappers and traders in the American Northwest. They would get together for the purposes of exchanging furs for supplies and whiskey. Mainly whiskey, I got. But anyway, these were characterized by, I'm quoting someone here, mirth, songs, dancing, shouting, trading, jumping, running, singing, racing, target shooting, yarns, frolic, with all sorts of extravagances that white men or Indians could invent. And attendees included the trappers, Indians, wives, children, travelers, various visitors, and tourists. Now, the Rendezvous is extensively celebrated over the entire United States, including Texas. Okay, even though there was not a major fur trade in Texas with beaver and the such. Activities at the gathering center on the shooting of muzzle-loading rifles, black powder rifles, throwing of knives and tomahawks, and some of them get quite good at doing this, okay? I'm not. They also have primitive archery, as well as cooking, dancing, singing, and of course, the telling of tall tales. And participants in the Rendezvous will assume a persona. You know, like you go into Second Life and you choose an avatar, well, here they have persona as a trapper or a trader or peddler or frontier housewife or Native American or a soldier or a card sharp or a miner or something like that. Now, perhaps the best known reenactor in the United States was William Frederick Cody, and of course in his Wild West show. Now, a lot of people don't realize he was a Medal of Honor winner for his work as a U.S. Army Scout. And he won his title in a Buffalo shootout with Bill Comstock, who also went by Buffalo Bill, because he killed 69 bison to Comstock's 48 in a single day. But anyway, it was his Wild West show, which toured the U.S. and Europe, that made reenactment history. Now the show usually began with a parade on horseback through the center of town. All the little kids crowding around, following, looking at the Indians on horseback, the soldiers, the cowboys, and soldiers from various countries around the world, all of them colorful costumes. Okay, main events included such things as feats of riding skill, races, shooting, stagecoach robberies, Indian attacks on wagon trains and settlers' cabins, and numerous historical Western figures, including, of course, Sitting Bull and a band of 20 braves, and sharpshooters such as Frank Butler and Annie Oakley. And you may have read recently that Annie Oakley's shotgun and Stetson and other memorabilia are up for auction and expected to bring quite a hefty little price. Now, in 1887, I'm going to have some, took his show to Great Britain for Queen Victoria's Jubilee, then toured Europe in 1889 and 1890. Denied a spot at the Chicago World's Fair of 1892-93, he set up shop just outside the exposition grounds. Made a lot of people mad. The fair promoters were mad, but in reality, he probably benefited the attendance there at the show as well. Anyway, the Wild West show did much to popularize the lure and the vanishing frontier and the establish of reenactment movement that we experience today. Now we're going to take a little moment or two here. We're going to look at some of the regional and local events. So if you want to go and engage in reenacting, or if you want to go and view a reenactment, there are all kinds of possibilities here. Well, one of the really close ones is right outside of town, south of College Station, Museum of the American GI. They will have a host an open house and battle reenactment at their site every March. Okay, the Liendo Plantation near Hempstead holds a Civil War reenactment on November 16th through the 18th of this year. Features Confederate and Union forces, cavalry, cannons, and it is quite a show. It's a very popular one. Another one, and this one is actually co-sponsored by the Department of Anthropology and Project Hold, okay, is the Hot Rocks competition, or cook-off. Features cooking as the Indians did it. In this case, he's making beef jerky here over a slow-moving fire, and it actually tastes pretty good. Okay, some of the cooking, however, is done in pits or with hot rocks heated up and dropped into a pot of water and brought to a boil. And the food includes the tubers and bulbs which the Indians would have eaten locally. Okay, now the events was canceled last year, unfortunately, because of the fire threat throughout Texas, but hopefully it'll recommence this fall. If it does, you know, come and get a true taste of Texas, as the Indians did, okay? One of those I really enjoy locally, Boonville Days, okay, hosted by the Brazos Valley Museum of Natural History. It also includes the Buffalo Stampede, which is a race that same day. It'll be occurring again this fall. Various groups will be there demonstrating or teaching pioneer and frontier skills. Quilting, printing, camping, campfire cooking, oxen, leatherworking, wood carving, black powder, buffalo soldiers, all part of the ongoing show. Another one we have is at Gonzales, which hosts a reenactment on the first Saturday in October. It's coming up at the Gonzales Pioneer Village Living History Center. And this commemorates the unsuccessful attempt by Mexican forces to remove a small cannon. And it's frequently remembered because of the famous Come and Take It battle flag, which you see hanging over here on the wall, more or less, modern version of it. Another reenactment opportunity is at Goliad on the weekend closest to May 27th, which is the Palm Sunday, the day of the actual massacre, is what we're known as the Goliad Massacre, but it commemorates the skirmishes and battles of that period of time. One of my favorites, of course, since I'm in it, Texas Heroes Day, an annual event on Saturday closest to September 18th. That should be September 15th of the coming year. Honoring Texas heroes, particularly the Muir Expedition and the men of the Dawson Massacre. You have various pioneer craft demonstrations. You have reenactors there, laying of the wreath ceremonies, cannon and musket salutes, dulcimer music, flag display, and guided tours of the park there.
Where is it?
LaGrange. Yeah, it's at the state park at LaGrange. Okay? Fun one to go to. And by the way, this particular one, we're firing from a hill overlooking the town of LaGrange, and you can hear the thunder rolling across that valley after you fire them. It's very interesting. Okay, Stephen F. Austin's birthday at the Austin State Cemetery on November 3rd of this year. There'll be a wreath ceremony, an address, a cannon and musket salute conducted in honor of his birthday. And of course, if you've never been to the Austin State Cemetery, all kinds of famous Texans are buried there, like Three-Legged Willie and, you know, Tom Landry. Okay. Washington on the Brazos, a number of you have visited there, I'm sure. We have a 2-day celebration of Texas independence in the spring. Reenactors in period clothing will be there. The Texas Army will fire their replica twin sister cannons. It's quite an interesting event. And you have various craftsmen and musicians providing education and entertainment. Also, at Washington on the Brazos State Park, you have Barrington Farms. The interpreters there conduct themselves much as the earlier residents of the farm did, back when it was still the home of the President Anson Jones. Depending upon the day's work, a visitor might learn how to drive oxen, help plant or harvest crops, try spinning, making soap, getting eggs out of the hens' nests, and so forth. The Thorpe Inn in Anderson, Texas has various events during the year. You'll have musicians, you have poets and storytellers, you have stagecoach rides that you can participate in there. Usually there's a blacksmith there. And if you are really lucky, you might catch a glimpse of the ghost of the Thorpe Inn, who appears here with his broad shoulders, long face, and flat-brimmed hat. You have to look for him. Okay, who are we? Well, we are members of a Cannoneer group, the Buckners Creek Cannoneers, or Buckners Creek Texians. We represent a period of time from the start of the Texas War of Independence through the early years of statehood. Okay, we have a cannon, we have muzzle-loading rifles, black powder pistols, and knives. In addition to firing the weapons, we also enjoy campfire cooking, especially cast iron pots and pans, leatherworking, canning, and preserving fruits and vegetables, butter making. Some of us are involved in quilting. Okay, and a host of frontier activities and games that we conduct at various events. So we have Mark and Eric and myself and Adam here. This other guy who stood in the pictures with us, I'm not sure what his name was, but we couldn't get him to leave, no. All right, anyway. Our favorite activity, of course, is firing the cannon. We enjoy the explosion of the powder, the concussion, the heat of the blast, and the smell of the smoke. However, when you're doing black powder, you have to remember safety always trumps both authenticity and fun. Black powder is explosive, okay? It has to be handled with care. As you'll see in this stop-action video here, you do not want to stand in front of the muzzle nor at the back, because you see the column of smoke rising from the fire hole here, the fire actually coming up. Okay, okay, so you can get severely burned or injured. Okay, thank you there. Okay, firing a cannon follows a prescribed sequence, and Eric is taking a group of people out at the dedication of the statue, the Texian dedication of the statue of the Texian soldier. Okay, through the process here. Okay, we're going to line up here, and then we're going to get the charge from the. In a moment, he's going to give the command. Okay, so we assume our positions. All right, so he's going to go get a blank shot. That's the only kind we shoot, of course. Well, yeah. Okay, so he pulls it out. Notice it's wrapped in aluminum foil, very period authentic. Okay. Contains 4 ounces of gunpowder. Okay, and Mark is going to ram it down ahead of the command, but that's all right. He rams it down rather thoroughly. Okay, he's already done it. Okay, so then they come over here, and we're going to put in the shot. In this case, it's not really shot. There's a little too much moss there. Take some of it back out. We put moss at the tip of it, and he's going to ram that down to the charge. Okay. Talking about aiming the cannon here. Okay, and this is where I'm come in. I'm the pricker. And what it does is I take a brass rod, has to be brass, not stainless steel, shove it down through the fire hole and prick that aluminum or paper roll, okay? And then hear those car horns going off? That's what makes it all worthwhile there. Okay, but anyway, as I say, we have the charge there, and the powder, as it emerges here, explodes, outside the muzzle, causes quite a fiery little blast there. As long as you're not standing in it, you're okay. Okay, it does get consumed. I've never seen any flour left littering the ground, white grass or anything like that. Okay, and so it just shows this sequence there. These are out of one of the movies. Okay, but as I say, safety is paramount. When visitors participate, and some of you recognize this visitor who's standing here with me as being Steve Vici, and Steve knows how to handle firearms, no doubt about that. Okay, but we still ran him through a few instructions here. Now, generally speaking, if we're, particularly with the cannons, we wear earplugs, okay, because if you don't, it's going to really harm your hearing. Okay, you don't necessarily need them for a musket, but if somebody is firing a musket directly over your head, and Boykin can tell you that's very loud.
Thank you.
Okay, so earplugs aren't authentic. Normally you just put your hands over your ears or something like that. But again, it's a safety matter. Okay, we made some modifications to the cannon. We put a percussion cap, just like he's putting on right there right now. Put a percussion cap on the cannon rather than using a fuse. If you use a fuse, sometimes it burns out. And so what you get instead is you get a misfire, but you have a slow burning ember. Well, to pull the powder out, you got to go in front of the cannon. You don't want to do that. Okay, now Eric just called out fire in the hole there. Okay, Steve sets the first trigger, pulls the first trigger, which sets the hair trigger on the musket, and then fires it. Okay, even Ann Boykin, as you see here, enjoyed firing one of the weapons, loaded with gunpowder and patch, but no lead ball. We don't bring we don't bring metal cannonballs or loads of grape shot or anything like that during a reenactment. We just use that Spanish moss to enhance the bang. Okay, it won't cause major injury. It doesn't travel very far, but still, we don't want anybody downrange because you get hit in the face with a bunch of hot moss. Okay, it's still not pleasant. It's kind of steaming when you get it. Okay, so Ann's going to fire the musket here in a moment. Come on, Ann, pull the trigger. There she goes. All right. You can notice there wasn't much of a kick on the gun either, okay? We didn't use a really heavy load of powder, but okay. Anyway, we don't allow anybody to stand in front of the muzzle after we've loaded and before we've fired. Again, a safety precaution, if you have people passing in front, kids like to throw things down the cannon barrel. Okay, so we don't leave it unattended, okay? Because if you didn't realize it, keys make excellent shrapnel. And they can tear the heck out of anything. Okay, and like cannons, the black powder rifles or muskets and the pistols will also produce a flash, even without flour. As you see here, this was at the Buffalo Stampede, and that's quite a little bit of flame coming out of there. So you don't point this and aim it at anybody and fire it. Okay, so in reenactments, you'll usually see the reenactors are pointing up in the air. Okay, that's a safety thing. Another safety thing, when you've got the rifle, you put the powder in, we don't always tap it down with a ramrod. Okay? The reason for that being, if you have a sudden accidental misfire there, that ramrod becomes a lethal missile. Okay, so in a lot of reenactments, all we do is we put in the powder, we tap it down, we don't put in a patch or anything like that, and then we fire it. Now, sometimes that gives us misfires, but it's a safer way of doing it. Okay, clothing for the period, not difficult to find. The Texan soldier was a farmer, sometimes ran around barefooted. And there was an article in this morning's paper about barefoot running, okay, where the minimal shoes. Okay, well, a lot of people used to do things like that. Okay, and the Texian soldier usually wore his normal clothing. Very few of them had uniforms, some did. But anyway, Noah Smithwick wrote in 1835 of the Volunteer Army. He said, buckskin breeches were the nearest approach to uniform, and there was a wide diversity even there, some of them being new and soft and yellow, while others from long familiarity with rain and grease and dirt had become hard and black and shiny. Boots being an unknown quality, some wore shoes and some moccasins. Here a broad-brimmed sombrero overshadows the military cap at its side, and there a tall bee-gum rode familiarly beside a coonskin cap with a tail hanging down behind, as all well-regulated tails should do. Okay. There's another interesting account of a young ranger who was going to a fandango wearing his new buckskins, got caught in a rainstorm on the way in, and got there and absorbed enough water and got lengthened, and it was way too long for dancing. So he pulled out his big knife, trimmed them off a little bit, and was having a great time until they started drying out. And so by the end of the evening, he was dancing around there wearing capri pants, I guess, or well, what we used to call high water pants, okay? All right, anyway. So you don't trim them off because that's a bad idea. They will dry out eventually. Okay, only a few of the officers and certain militia members wore uniforms that came from the States via New Orleans, okay? And these were distributed to the Army when they came in. There's at least one shipment of 500 black leather caps that came in, military-style caps as you see here. Now the summer hats that were worn were normally straw, often Mexican-made. Brought a bunch of hats with me. The purpose was to keep the sun out of your eyes and the rain from dripping down the back of your neck. Okay? Baseball caps may keep the sun out of your eyes, but they don't do much about the rain, and so they weren't very popular back then. Okay, the rims tended to be flat and broad. They were not curled up like the cowboy hats that we see today. They could have been, but if they were curled up, it was just because they were getting old and worn out. But anyway, cool weather hats might still be made of straw, but they might be made of felt or leather. And some people even wore the black top hats that were popular in the 1800s. As a reenactor, you can't have too many hats. They still serve the same purposes, and you want one that fits fairly snugly. Okay, broad brimmed hats have a bad habit of flying off in a breeze. Okay, they catch the wind very nicely, so you might want to tie them on or something like that. Okay, anyway, there's some hats there. Shirts were cotton, had no collar, and many were of a pullover type like I'm wearing here, perhaps with a few buttons with leather lacing maybe to close it up. Trousers, as we already heard earlier, were generally buckskin, or they were cotton in the summertime too. If you were an army on the march in the army, you probably wore buckskin because it wore a lot better, wouldn't tear, and anyway, would hold up. Okay, most of the pants that they had no pockets in the trousers, okay, or the buckskins, okay. For that reason, men generally carried a possibles bag, a man purse if you want to call it that, okay, in which they put their powder, shot, and other essential items. Okay, it was not, well, it was considered appropriate. Footwear varied from heavy socks. Some people ran around in heavy wool socks and such. They also wore moccasins, shoes, boots, whatever they could find. Now, boots tended to be scarce, and they were not often a great fit. And so if you were trying to march or ride in a pair that was too small, it was very uncomfortable, and you were going to cause a lot of damage to your feet. Large ones were more desirable, because if they were too big, you could always put on some more socks. If you owned more socks, you might have only one pair, or you could stuff in a bunch of straw or rags or anything else. Now, some reenactors make their own boots, okay, which can be done if you know how to work leather. However, if you go out and you buy a moccasin kit or a boot kit from like Tandy Leather or something like that, those usually have insoles that are made out of some synthetic material, and they also have synthetic soles on them, so they're not quite as authentic most of the time. Okay, so most of us just go out, we buy a pair of boots, and we scuff them up good, and make it look period appropriate, or what we think is period appropriate. Now, I'm wearing a pair of scuffed up boots, but unfortunately, they're made of ostrich skin. So I'm not period appropriate. Of course, you already knew that because I'm wearing an Aggie ring. My glasses are tinted, all kinds of other things like that. Now, we often think of reenactors dressed in fringed buckskin shirts and pants. I've got mine hanging over there on the wall. It's not too practical in Texas. Leather is extremely hot. Okay? When I came in today and was setting up, this outfit was hot enough. I wasn't about to put on that buckskin shirt. Okay. Of course, it also absorbs moisture, gains length and weight, and so forth. Despite that, a lot of us do have leather clothing, and we wear it simply because the spectators expect that on occasion. So if the weather's cool enough, we'll do that. Now, every reenactor has to have a canteen. In the early Texian days, gourd canteens were the usual thing. Here's a gourd canteen. You're going to be out in the sun a lot. You've got to stay hydrated, so you carry a canteen. I've got mine over there. It's a metal one. However, it is wrapped in fur to help keep you a little cooler. And if things were getting way too hot, I would dip in a nearby stream or something like that, get the fur wet, and let that evaporate and keep my water a little bit cooler. Okay, I suspect that a lot of the old canteens probably were old whiskey bottles that have been wrapped up in leather. That would have made a great canteen, even if it wasn't empty when you started. Okay, most of the time, flintlock muskets and rifles were the most common weapon used during the period we represent. Percussion caps actually came about, were first patented in 1807, used in U.S. Army rifles in 1811, but they were a little uncommon at the time of the Texas War of Independence. They did exist, however. So I don't feel too bad with my rifle having a percussion cap on it. There are lots of reasons for going with that. Okay, but you can be as authentic as you want to be for the period. Now, you can buy a serviceable musket or rifle for under $500. If you want to really be fancy, you can spend $7,500 on one. Mine is not anywhere near worth anywhere near that much, of course. Anyway, knives. Of course, we recognize this gentleman here with his Bowie knife. Those are naturally a favorite among Texas reenactors. You know, everybody has to have a Bowie knife. They're not street legal, of course. And anyway, you can have a blacksmith make you one. You can buy one. During the days of the Republic, blacksmiths made knives out of anything metal that you brought into them. Files were a very good thing for making knives out of. I've got a couple of those. Okay, so these are often home forged. Now, unless you're a daytime only reenactor, then you need some sort of shelter. Now you look at this and say, what kind of a shelter in that? Okay, I do know some people who can build them from natural materials on site. This is, in this case, an Indian dwelling built by Mark Suter at the Hot Rocks competition. And he's very into primitive things, and he actually built that on site. And it was amazing. It's about 6 feet across at the bottom. He had his bedrolls out in there. Very nice. Okay, anyway, most reenactors, however, opt for a little more comfort, sometimes much more comfort than would have been found in the marching army. We imagine ourselves all to be at least the rank of colonel, okay, which means that we had tents that were more than just the little pup tents or A-frame tents, okay, and we would have a table and chairs and a cooking fire going with a coffee pot and a cast iron pot with a meal of the day and so forth. And occasionally some reenactment groups will take a whole hog, put it on a spit, roast it over the weekend, and on the final day or hours they all enjoy it. Okay, we're going to go right now, and I'm going to there are numerous reenactment groups in the state of Texas. A lot of them will put together some sort of a record of their accomplishments or their fun, if you want to call it that, whatever it is. This is one we put together on Buckners Creek, people, from our first year there at Texas Heroes Day. So I'll let you watch it here. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. All it is a song and then the thing that goes with it. our first firing. We were thrilled that the cannon didn't blow up. There's Mark and his wife. Here's me with my powder horn. The gentleman on the right back there works at Washington, Brazos. These are some of the other Cannoneers who are there. Modern building. Here we are moving the cannon. The battle flag of San Jacinto. There's that motley crew again.
Just speak up a little bit more for the
Oh, okay. Sorry, you can't hear my running commentary there, can you? The Alamo. They didn't like me pulling on the cannon, so I got replaced. Oh, okay. I don't want to talk. Okay, so that's the end of the talk. I hope I kept it down to about 30 minutes or so. And any questions?